And you might be surprised to learn that there's no one right way to do democracy.
Yeah. I mean, each country kind of has its own adventure, right? Like
Yeah,
choosing your own adventure.
Yep. Exactly.
But they're all trying to kind of get to the same place.
Yeah, so we're going to explore some of these different systems today, see what makes them tick. And to really get into the weeds, we're going to be focusing specifically on India, a country that holds elections on a scale that's almost unimaginable.
Yeah. So you're right. There's no one size fits all. And I think what's so interesting is how each system reflects the country's history, their culture, their political kind of landscape. But why should we care how other countries run their elections?
Right.
Well, because these systems are the foundation of any democracy.
Yeah.
So understanding them helps us kind of evaluate their fairness, their efficiency, the impact they have on representation.
Okay, so let's start with a quick world tour of election systems.
Yeah.
Just to give everyone a sense of the diversity out there, we've got the U.S. with its electoral college.
Right.
Where a candidate can actually win the presidency without winning the popular vote.
Yeah, it's happened a few times.
Right, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the U.K. with its parliamentary system.
Right.
Where the prime minister, they're not actually directly elected by the people.
Right.
They're chosen by the party, whichever party has the majority in the parliament.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. And then we can't forget Germany, a country that has seen a lot of political upheaval over the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And their mixed system, it's really aiming to balance regional and national interests.
Right. They want to make sure that smaller parties have a voice as well.
Yeah. And then you have Brazil, which is really embraced technology in a big way. I mean, they use electronic voting, so they get results super fast.
Yeah, and that leads very quickly to being able to have the transition of power more quickly than in a lot of other countries.
Right. Yeah. So
that's quite a mix. But today, we are putting the spotlight on India, a country that holds the title for the world's largest democracy. I mean, over 900 million people are eligible to vote.
It's mind-boggling.
It's more than twice the population of the U.S. So the question is, how do they manage to pull off elections on such a massive scale?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it so interesting is that they've developed a system that's not just efficient, but it's also remarkably inclusive and secure. And they've had to overcome some really serious challenges to do this. I mean, just consider the vast size of the country, the diversity of the country.
Right.
And, I think what's impressive is their commitment to making sure that every citizen, from a farmer in a really remote village to a tech worker in, a bustling city, they all have an equal opportunity to vote.
Yeah. That's a powerful image. So what are some of the key elements that make this Indian system so unique?
Well, one standout feature is the Election Commission of India,
Okay.
which is also known as the ECI.
This is an independent body, and they oversee every single aspect of the election process, from setting the dates to ensuring that voting is free and fair.
Wow.
So they're really like a guardian of democracy, making sure that everyone's playing by the rules.
So it's not just some bureaucratic agency. They actually have real power and authority.
Exactly.
Oh.
And they've been instrumental in maintaining the integrity of elections for, over 7 decades, which I think is a real testament to their effectiveness. India has consistently held elections every 5 years since independence, despite these complexities.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable, given the scale of the challenges they face. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm dying to know a little bit more about how this actually works on the ground.
Yeah.
What happens when election season rolls around in India?
Well, first, you have to picture this incredibly diverse landscape, right?
Yeah.
You've got Towering mountains, sprawling deserts, dense jungles, bustling cities, quiet villages. Just holding elections across such a vast and varied terrain, it's a logistical feat in itself. That's why India conducts its elections in phases. They're spread out over several weeks.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's like this carefully orchestrated dance,
Yeah,
but with millions of participants.
exactly.
So how do they make sure that everyone who's eligible actually gets to vote? We're talking about a massive population, many of whom live in very remote areas.
Yeah, so they've got a really impressive system for voter registration and outreach.
Okay.
They've utilized technology so you can actually register to vote through online portals.
Okay.
But they also go the extra mile.
Okay.
They send teams of officials to conduct door-to-door surveys, especially in those rural areas.
Wow.
And their goal is to make sure that every single eligible voter is on the electoral roll.
Okay.
And they also make sure that those voters know where and when to cast their ballot.
Wow. That's dedication. Okay. So I've heard a lot about India's use of electronic voting machines.
Yeah.
Or EVMs.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So India was actually one of the first countries to adopt EVMs on a large scale.
Really?
And it's been a total game changer.
Wow.
So these machines, they're designed to be really simple, really intuitive, even for people who may not be literate.
Okay.
Each button represents a candidate, and it often has their photo, it has their party symbol.
Okay.
This makes voting really quick, really easy.
That makes sense. But how secure are these EVMs?
Yeah.
I mean, we hear a lot about hacking and electronic manipulation.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a really valid concern.
Yeah.
And India has definitely taken steps to address it. So their EVMs are actually designed to be standalone units,
Okay.
meaning that they're not connected to the internet,
Oh, wow.
which drastically reduces the risk of cyber attacks. And to further ensure transparency, they've introduced something called the Voter Verifiable Paper Audit Trail.
Okay. The voter verifiable paper audit trail.
Yes.
VVPAT.
Yes, VVPAT.
Sounds very high tech. What is that?
It's essentially a paper receipt that's generated alongside each electronic vote.
Oh, okay.
So the voter can verify that the receipt actually reflects their choice.
Okay.
And then it's stored securely.
Okay.
So this paper trail provides an extra layer of accountability, and it helps build trust in the system.
That's a clever way to combine, the speed and efficiency of electronic voting with the reassurance of a paper trail.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But technology is one part of the story, right? What else makes India's election system stand out?
Well, another crucial aspect is their focus on accessibility and inclusivity. They go to great lengths to ensure that everyone, no matter their background, no matter their circumstances, can exercise their right to vote.
Can you use some specific examples of how they do that?
Yeah, so for voters in remote areas, they'll set up polling booths in places that you can only reach by foot or by boat. They also have provisions for senior citizens and people with disabilities,
Okay.
making sure that the polling stations are accessible and that assistance is available if needed.
It's really impressive.
Yeah.
They seem to have thought of everything to make voting as easy and as accessible as possible. But with all this emphasis on inclusivity, on technology, do they still manage to maintain transparency and prevent any kind of, funny business?
Absolutely. Transparency is paramount in this system.
Okay.
And they have really strict rules and regulations in place to prevent any form of manipulation or fraud.
Okay.
So, for instance, they have limits on campaign spending.
Okay.
There are codes of conduct for all the political parties and candidates.
Okay.
And they have really robust mechanisms for monitoring and addressing any violations.
So it's not just about getting people to to the polls. It's about making sure the entire process is fair and above board.
Exactly. It's all about ensuring that people trust the process.
Yeah. I'm really starting to see why India's system is considered such a model for large-scale democracies.
Yeah, it's a system that has really evolved over time. It's constantly adapting to new challenges and learning from past experiences. It's not perfect,
Right.
but it's a testament to India's commitment to upholding those democratic values.
Okay, this has been fascinating so far, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. I'm eager to delve a little bit deeper into how this massive democratic exercise actually plays out.
I agree, there's so much more to explore. So, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll look at the specific phases of the Indian election process. We'll start with campaigning and go all the way through to counting the votes. And we'll also examine some of the challenges they face and what lessons other countries can learn from their experience.
Sounds like a plan. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've established that India's election system is this fascinating blend of tradition and innovation. They've managed to make democracy work on a scale that's just incredible. But I'm curious, how does this massive operation actually play out in practice?
Well, picture this. The Election Commission of India, the ECI, they kick things off by setting the dates and issuing a strict code of conduct for all the political parties and candidates. This code covers everything. I mean, we're talking campaign spending limits, content of political speeches, you name it. It's their way of ensuring a level playing field and preventing, any underhanded tactics.
So right from the get-go, the ECI establishes these clear rules of engagement. But how do they enforce those rules in a country as vast and diverse as India?
Well, they have a network of observers and officials deployed across the entire country.
Yeah.
They're monitoring the campaigns, investigating any violations, and they don't hesitate to take action. I mean, they'll issue warnings, they'll impose fines, they'll even disqualify candidates who break the rules.
Oh, wow. No messing around.
No, it's serious business.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Oh.
Sounds like they're really committed to keeping things clean. But let's zoom in on Election Day itself. How do they manage to get hundreds of millions of people to the polls in a country with such diverse geography and infrastructure?
Logistical marvel. It really is.
Yeah.
Polling stations, they're set up everywhere.
Okay.
Schools and community centers in urban areas. Remote villages that you can only reach by foot or by boat.
Wow.
They even set up temporary booths for nomadic communities. I mean, the goal is to make voting as convenient as possible for every single citizen.
That's remarkable. They really go the extra mile to ensure everyone had a chance to participate.
They do.
And this is where those EVMs that we talked about earlier, this is where they come into play, right?
Exactly. So the simplicity of those EVMs makes voting quick and easy, even for those who may not be literate or familiar with technology. This helps ensure that everyone can cast their vote without any confusion or intimidation.
And to further ensure the integrity of the process, those VVPATs, the paper trails, they provide that extra layer of verification. So it's a system that aims for both efficiency and transparency.
Precisely. And then once the polls close, the counting begins.
Right.
This is where the EVMs really shine. Because the votes are recorded electronically, results start coming in within hours.
Wow.
Sometimes even faster. It's a far cry from the days of manual counting, which would take weeks, even months.
That's incredible. That speed and efficiency of the counting process must really help build trust and confidence in the system. It prevents a lot of the uncertainty and speculation that we sometimes see in other countries.
Absolutely. And I think it's a testament to the amount of planning and preparation that goes into every election. The ECI works tirelessly to make sure everything runs smoothly. They've got it down to a science.
Okay. So far, we've been focusing on how India manages the practical aspects of holding these elections on this massive scale. But I'm also curious about the political dynamics at play. What are some of the challenges that they face in maintaining a truly free and fair democratic process?
Well, one major challenge is the spread of misinformation,
Ah, yeah.
especially online.
Yeah.
With the rise of social media, it's become so much easier for false or misleading information to spread, potentially influencing people's decisions.
It's a problem that a lot of democracies are struggling with right now.
Yeah, it's a global problem.
Is the ECI doing anything to kind of combat that?
Oh, yeah. They're very aware of this issue, and they've been taking a lot of steps to try to address it. They've partnered with social media platforms to try to flag and remove fake news, and they've launched public awareness campaigns to educate voters just about the importance of, verifying information before they share it.
Yeah, you got to check your sources.
Absolutely.
Sounds like they're taking this multi-pronged approach, which is probably the best way to tackle a really complex issue like this. We also touched upon this idea of vote buying earlier.
Yeah.
Is that a significant problem in India?
It's a concern,
Okay.
particularly in some rural areas, where poverty and illiteracy rates are higher.
Right.
So the ECI has been working to crack down on this by increasing surveillance, deploying these special observers, and encouraging citizens to report any suspicious activity. They're trying to empower people to get involved.
So it's not just relying on enforcement, but also trying to empower citizens to play a role in safeguarding the elections. That's good. But even with all these efforts, I imagine there are still critics out there who question how fair India's elections actually are.
Of course. I mean, no system is perfect. There will always be people who raise concerns or point out areas for improvement. One criticism that we hear a lot is that, the first past the post system, where the candidate with the most votes wins, even if it's not a majority, can lead to a party winning a majority of seats without winning a majority of the popular vote.
That's an interesting point. So it's possible for a party to come to power without actually having the support of the majority of the electorate.
It is, and it's something that's been debated a lot in India.
Okay.
Some argue that a proportional representation system where seats are allocated based on the percentage of votes received would be a much fairer way to do it. But then others argue that the first past the post system gives a clearer mandate, and you get a stronger government.
So there are valid arguments on both sides.
Absolutely.
It's a complicated issue, no easy answers. But the fact that these debates are happening, it's a sign of a healthy democracy.
Mm-hmm.
It means that people are engaged, thinking critically about how to improve the system.
I completely agree. And the ECI is always reviewing and refining their processes.
Right.
They want to address these concerns, and they want to enhance the integrity and the efficiency of the elections. They're constantly working on it.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the practicalities of voting to the complexities of ensuring fairness and transparency. What are some of the key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind as they kind of think about India's election system?
Well, one key takeaway, I think, is the importance of having a strong, independent election commission. That's really key. The ECI has played a crucial role in making sure that India's elections remain free and fair.
It's so important. Having that neutral body with real authority, that's essential for upholding democratic principles.
Yeah, and another key takeaway is the power of technology. It can really enhance accessibility, efficiency, and transparency. And India's use of the EVMs and the VVPATs has been a game changer. It's something that other countries can learn from.
For sure, for sure. Those are great points. And what about the human element? What role do the people of India play in making their democracy work?
Oh, the people are at the heart of it all. I mean, really. Their participation, their engagement, their commitment to these democratic values, that's what makes the system work. Despite the challenges, they turn out to vote in huge numbers, and they hold their leaders accountable.
That's pretty inspiring. It really drives home the point that democracy is not just about structures and institutions. It's really about the people who make it happen.
Exactly. And India, with this vibrant and diverse democracy, offers this really powerful example for the rest of the world. It shows that democracy can thrive even in the most challenging of circumstances, as long as the people are committed to those principles.
Okay, this has been an incredible journey so far into the heart of Indian democracy. We've learned so much about how they handle these elections on this massive scale, the challenges they face, and the lessons they offer to the rest of the world.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, and in our final segment, we're going to shift our focus back to a global perspective.
Okay.
We're going to compare and contrast different election systems
Right.
and explore what we can learn from each other's experiences.
Sounds like a great way to wrap things up. Welcome back to our deep dive.
Oh.
So we've explored a lot of different approaches to elections, from the U.S. Electoral College to Brazil's high-tech system. And of course, we took that deep dive into India's incredible feat of holding elections for over 900 million people. I'm really curious to bring all these threads together. What are some of the broader insights we can get from looking at these systems side by side?
Well, it's fascinating to see how each country has tailored its system, to fit their own history, their political culture, their geography even. There really is no one-size-fits-all model for democracy. But I think what's important is that each system upholds those core principles of free and fair elections, where everyone has a voice and the results truly reflect what the people want.
Right. It's about finding the system that works best in each unique context, but still sticking to those fundamental democratic values.
Yeah.
Are there any, universal lessons we can draw from India's experience? I mean, they seem to have figured out how to run these massive elections.
Well, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of having a strong independent election commission. I mean, the ECI, their authority, their impartiality, it's crucial for ensuring the process is fair and transparent. They're like a referee that everyone trusts to enforce the rules.
So it's not just about having the rules. It's about having someone to actually enforce them and keep things honest.
Yeah.
I could see how that would be especially important in places where, maybe there's a history of political interference or corruption.
Exactly. And another lesson worth highlighting is India's use of technology, especially the EVMs and the VVPATs. It's made the whole process more streamlined, more accessible, and more transparent. Now, maybe not every country is ready to go fully electronic, but there's definitely something to learn from how India has used tech to strengthen the process.
Right. They've made some real innovations there. But technology alone isn't enough, right? You need that human element. People need to be engaged and believe in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is a tool, but it only works if people trust it and use it properly. And in India, you see that strong sense of civic duty, that willingness to participate and uphold democratic values. It's really at the heart of what makes their system work.
It's pretty inspiring to see how India has made it all come together on such a massive scale. But I'm also curious what other countries can learn from the different approaches out there. Like, take the U.S. system with its electoral college, for example. It seems pretty unique and, honestly, a bit confusing.
The U.S. system is definitely unique. It's a product of its history, wanting to balance the power of individual states with the national government. And the Electoral College, even though it's controversial, was designed to ensure that the president had support from different regions, not just the most populated areas.
So there is a logic to it, even if it doesn't always seem straightforward. But it gets criticized a lot for not always reflecting the popular vote.
Yeah, that's a valid point. It's a big debate in the U.S. whether to reform or even abolish the Electoral College. It raises important questions about balancing the interests of different groups and regions within a democracy.
Makes you think, for sure. Okay, now what about the UK's parliamentary system? Seems pretty different from the presidential systems we see in the US and other countries.
The UK is a good example of a parliamentary democracy. The head of government, the prime minister, isn't elected directly. They're chosen by the party that wins the most seats in parliament. It's a system that emphasizes party unity and discipline.
So it's the party, not just the individual leader, that really takes center stage. It's a big contrast to the US, where the president is seen as the dominant figure.
Exactly. Each system has its strengths and weaknesses. The UK system might be more efficient in getting things done, but it can also lead to a lack of checks and balances if one party has too much power.
Interesting, there's always a trade-off.
Well,
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the nuts and bolts of voting to the broader challenges of ensuring fair and meaningful elections. What's the main takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember?
for me, it's that democracy is a journey, not a destination. It takes constant work, adaptation, and a willingness to learn from others. There's no one perfect system, but we can always strive to make our systems better, more inclusive, and more responsive to the people.
That's a great way to put it. It's about always pushing for progress, not just settling for the status quo.
And by having these conversations, exploring different ideas, and sharing what we've learned, we can work together to make democracy stronger around the world.
Will said. It's been a fascinating deep dive into global election systems. We've seen how diverse they can be, the hurdles they face, and some really inspiring ways countries are finding solutions.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep participating in the democratic process. Your voice matters, your vote matters.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time. Keep that curiosity alive and stay engaged in shaping the future of democracy.